So, hello again, everybody. I shaved. Sometimes I need to do it. Makes me feel a little better. Need to lose a little bit of weight. More than a little bit, a lot of weight, actually. Another 20 kilos to lose. I've lost about 7, 8 so far. Anyway, coming to you real quick because I've been listening to some podcasts also about UFOs. And I was wondering, do any of you have any good UFO stories? Something that's real, something that's happened to you. And I wanted to tell you a story about something that happened to me. When I was 8 years old, we lived in Tioga, Louisiana, just across the street from the hospital that's there in Tioga, between the main part of Tioga and going out towards Grant Parish, or out towards what used to be called Dresser Industries. When we lived in a small house just across the street, and my dad had gotten back from Vietnam, or Thailand actually. He was stationed in Thailand in the Army for a few years, for some years, and he had just gotten back maybe a year before. And what I do remember very well, this was during the Iranian hostage siege, so Carter was, I think, was still president. I do remember that. It was at the end of his 4-year term. But my mom, my dad had a room, and then me and my brother and sister had a big room. I think it was, yeah, I believe the three of us were in a big room together, or maybe not. I don't remember. It's been so long ago. But sadly, the house had burned down some years after we moved out of it, and then they rebuilt something else there. But it was a nice little house, very typical little cottage type house from probably from the 1950s and 60s. It did its job. It was a nice little house, had a nice little garden around it, and in the back of it was a wooded area, actually. And the yard was quite wooded also. Very sandy, though. I do remember the sand. But anyway, it was one evening. Well, let me set up here also for you. I used to open my window up to my bedroom every night after my mother put me in bed. I would open the window up and look outside. I always had this thought that I need to look outside. There could be something outside. And even this very day, I still look out the windows, or I walk around the house like that. But I remember where I used to live at when I was still married, we had a big terrace, actually. And I used to just go out there at night, no matter what time of the year it was, and just look up at the stars. It was such a beautiful place, actually, in Sancerre, in here in Switzerland, the Jura, above Nîmes. And but anyway, here I was 8 years old. I believe I was 8. I'm pretty sure I was 8 years old. I think it was 1976 or something like that, I believe. And I looked out my mom was in the bathroom, and my dad was in bed. My sister and brother were asleep, and I looked out the window, and I saw something. Now, this window was, I could look out it. I didn't have to, it was quite a big window. And I saw something out there, and it was squatting just outside the window looking back at me. Now, I don't know if this was something psychological, something I've been like hoping to see all my life or what it was, but I do remember seeing this, and it had a green hue to it. There was some light outside, and it had a long face like a horse, but it was almost fish-like, or what's it, the fish looks like a horse in the sea. I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, it sort of reminded me of that, but it was squatting down looking at me. And I just dropped to the floor, and I crawled out my bedroom, across the hallway, into the bathroom, into the tub with my mom. And she was yelling for my dad, Travis, Mike, something's wrong. And she's asking, what's going on? And I was like in just a panic. I mean, I was so afraid. I remember so clearly how I felt. It was like oh my God, I'd never been so afraid in my entire life, And I've never been so afraid since. But, oh my goodness, I hit the floor, and I was low crawling. So I was really preparing for the Army. But I tell you what, I crawled into the bathtub with her. That's how afraid I was. And she yelled for my dad. And I remember my dad came in, and he was just right there. I mean, it was a very small house. It wasn't a big house whatsoever. But he came in, and he brought me back into my bedroom, look out the window, I had to change into some new PJs because I was completely wet. And then he didn't have a gun. All he had was a flashlight with his big old round, old school 9-volt battery, the big 9-volt battery flashlights. And he grabbed this sword that he had on the wall that he brought back from Thailand, and it wasn't even sharp, but he grabbed that, and we went outside. And I was like, okay, well, I'll see you when you get back. And he's like, no, you're coming with me. Okay, he did not add to the whole, you know. I was bricking it, as the English would say. I was bricking it. So anyway, he made me follow him outside. We went outside onto the garage from the kitchen and took a left, and went back towards the back of the house. We walked around to where this spot was outside the window. It's the only it was the only window on that side of the house, actually. And he proceeded to, you know, put the flashlight showing the ground, this kind of stuff, and didn't see any tracks or anything. And it was quite sandy and a bit leafy there, you know, and so you would see something, you know. And oh man, and then he said, well, come with me. And so he brought me out behind the house, probably not too far. I could still see the house to the wood line out there. And he said, stay here, I'll be back. He left me there for like 10 minutes. I don't know what he did, but when he came back, he asked me, did you hear me coming? I said, yeah. He goes, that's right. And from, you know, you'll always hear people moving into the woods. You'll always be able to hear. As long as you sit down, you're quiet, you'll always be able to hear someone else moving around or something else moving around. So don't worry about it. So I learned a lesson that night. It didn't stop me from looking out the window anymore, though. Although I never saw this again. But I do remember a few months later, and this was Christmas, I believe, around Christmas time. I got up one night to go to the kitchen and grab something to drink. I was thirsty, and my mom always kept the kitchen light, not the whole overhead light. She had like a small light, like over the stove or something that was always on, you know. And so I could, you know, I moved outside the room. I went to the kitchen, and in the kitchen I saw this figure in the kitchen looking back at me. And my heart panicked again real quickly. And I looked again and realized it was actually my reflection. And so, oh my goodness, man, I was just up on it. I was so afraid at that time, you know, a young boy, you know, 8, 9 years old, and just afraid of my shadow. But, you know, I learned a lot in that instant with my father when he brought me out. And I've never, ever been afraid of being outdoors in the woods, actually, ever again. I did a lot more stuff in the woods, in the forest, walking around at night, camping out, even by myself, that kind of stuff. I never had any fears. I learned to walk very quietly in the woods, which helped me later on in the Army for patrolling and this kind of stuff and movements. And even today, as big as I'm a big guy I am, old as I am, I can still sort of get around really well in the forest without making too much noise. And I feel very comfortable out there, even at night, especially at night, because you can hear, you know, you can hear everything around you. Now, something dropping from the sky, it's a little bit different. But if it's a parachute, you can hear the parachute usually too. Anyway, this was my little story about my experience. Now, there was another story that came in, and I didn't see this. But when we lived across, some years before that, we lived across the street from my grandparents' house. We lived in this small little shotgun shack, actually. And it was called a shotgun shack just because from the front door to the back door, you can see all the way through. You can shoot a shotgun, and you wouldn't hit any of the walls. You can shoot right out the back of the house. But we lived in this. My father moved us there to be closer to my grandparents, or my mother's parents. And this was where, this is at the, I guess the northern end of Tioga, next to the highway, where TGNY was at and the pharmacy was at. And at that time, there was a small little gas station right next to it. Now it's a bigger, like a Shell station. It's much bigger now on the main road. And this was the road going back towards the old train station and the high school, actually. Anyway, so we lived across the street, and two crazy things happened while we were there. My father went off to Vietnam, actually. He was fighting in the war, and in Thailand. This was before he ever came back, and we were living there, and we were alone. Actually, we weren't that alone. My grandma, my mother's grandmother, my grandma Mary Johnson, who was French Cajun, she lived with us during that time. So I remember sleeping in the bed with her and my sister. we had this big squeaky bed we slept in because we were little. And then, and I loved my grandma Johnson. She and I were really close. And even later on, I would always go see her. And before she passed away, I believe at 94, I saw her again before she passed away. When I was in the Army, I came home to see her. But and my mom and my brother slept in her bedroom, actually. And so, but we had neighbors that were visiting we had family that had been visiting my grandparents, my mother's mother, my Barbara Mahfouz, and my grandpa Fred Mahfouz, across the street in this big old house that was also very scary, by the way. These folks who left, they said they actually saw a flying saucer sitting behind our house that had lit behind our house. Now, I never saw this, you know, never heard of it, about this kind of stuff before, but they swear, and they swear they pulled into this gravel driveway we had, and they flashed their lights on it, and then they said it just flew away, you know. But this is during that time when all this was going on, all this hype and fear of UFOs. Do I believe in UFOs? How can I be so arrogant to believe that we're the only living things out here in the world, you know, in the universe, you know? Of course I believe it's possible, you know. Will we ever see it in our time? I don't know, but there's more and more discoveries, more and more stuff coming out there. It's very interesting, and I do enjoy reading about it and seeing videos about it. But anyway, what do you think? What has happened to you in your life, or do you know any cool stories like that? I really would like to read it in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and please share my videos, and please drop a comment. Anyway, I look forward to hearing from you and your crazy UFO stories, an alien abduction. Anyway, have a good night, and I'll talk to you very soon. Bye.